Hey guys, welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today we have to talk about the big news that came out yesterday with the Jets head coach Robert Saleh being fired and escorted out of the building by security. So I was busy all day yesterday. I couldn't do a reaction. So that's why I'm a little late on this one, but I still have a lot to say about this. And it is a little bit surprising, because I haven't been the biggest Robert Saleh fan, and I'm going to get into all of that throughout this video. But if you would have told me before the season started that Robert Saleh is going to be the first head coach to get fired this season, I would have said, oh, they must have started like 0-4 or 0-5 or something. Like 5 weeks through the season, they fire Saleh. They must be an absolute train wreck. And I don't think they're that good, but 2-3 on paper, it's not like it's the end of the world. So to me, that shows that the Jets clearly didn't have a lot of confidence in Saleh going into the season. If they were going to give him this short of a leash to go 2-3, it's kind of crazy. I know they've had some really embarrassing losses. That loss against Denver was pathetic. The loss against the Vikings was really bad with Aaron throwing 3 picks, but that wasn't really the fault of the defense. We know Saleh is a defensive guy. Now, he wasn't calling defensive plays. That's kind of a big problem I had with Saleh is the reason he got the Jets job is because he was an awesome defensive play caller for the Niners. Then he gets to New York because of that and says, yeah, I'm just not going to call the defensive plays. So that's a little weird thing I had with Saleh, and we're going to get to Saleh. But just talking about this from like an organizational, structural standpoint from the Jets, this is just a very strange move. And I think it really highlights how dysfunctional the Jets are. And there's a reason why the Jets have the longest playoff drought in the NFL. They're one of the worst managed teams in not the NFL, but all of professional American sports. There's a reason why they've been so bad for so long. It's clear their owner just doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And this move here, I think, really highlights that, because if Saleh was on such a short leash where if he goes 2-3, you're firing him, why the fuck didn't you just fire him going into the year? It's clear you had big reservations about Robert Saleh going into this season if you were only going to give him 5 games this year to see what happened. So that's kind of my thing is I just think it's such a bad look on the team to fire a coach in the middle of a season. I mean, we've seen it work a couple times where an interim comes in, the team plays better. We saw that with the Raiders a couple years ago whenever Rich Bisaccia became their new head coach and they actually made playoffs that year. So we've seen it happen a couple times, but generally whenever you fire your head coach in the middle of the year, it's this big indication that A, the organization doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, and B, the team's just not very good. And that was, one of my most controversial videos on this channel, at least in terms of the comments section, was a video I made in the offseason. It was 5 reasons why the Jets won't make the playoffs. And one of my biggest issues on that list was I didn't trust the coaching staff. We knew Nathaniel Hackett was no good at his job. And I said in that video, I don't know if Robert Saleh is any good at his job. So even though they fired him and I think it's a bad look, I still agree in principle with firing Saleh. I just think you should have done it before the season. That way you could have had like a proper process to look for a new head coach, because now you're just elevating Ulbrich, who was their defensive coordinator under Saleh. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, because it's clear that the big problem with this team is the offense. And that kind of gets back to why is the move here to fire Saleh? Because their big losses have been because of the offense being really bad. The first game against the Niners, their offense simply could not keep up with the Niners. Their defense didn't look good in that game either, but I'd say overall as a team, they struggled in that one. Denver, they held Denver to 10 points, but the offense was putrid in that game. So that one's more on Aaron and the offense. And then the Vikings one, Aaron threw 3 picks, including 2 in the first quarter. So that one's on the offense. So it's like the problem with the Jets isn't the defense, which is what Saleh is more tied to. Even though he doesn't call the plays, he's much more tied to the defensive side of the ball. That wasn't the problem in New York. So even though I don't think Saleh's a great coach, firing him doesn't really fix anything. It doesn't change the fact that this offense is really stagnant. It doesn't change the fact that you have a 40-year-old quarterback who looks closer to 50 than he does 40. It's just, to me, I just think it's a terrible look for the organization, because it doesn't improve your team at all. It makes you look like the dysfunctional mess that you really are. And if, like I said, if you were going to get rid of him, why didn't you do it in the offseason, have a proper vetting process for a new head coach? As for Saleh himself, like I said, I don't think he should have gotten the job to begin with. With me, I just always have a big reservation with defensive guys who, it's one thing if you're going to bring in a defensive guy and they're going to call the plays like DeMeco Ryans in Houston. Like, he's obviously proven that he's a stud last year, making the playoffs. With Robert Saleh, though, was never head coach, brought in to be the head coach / DC, and said, no, I'm just not going to call defensive plays. That is an immediate red flag right there for me. For even offensive guys, if you bring in a sweet offensive play caller to be your head coach, it's kind of like he's there to be not only the head coach, but also the offensive play caller. That's what McVay does. That's what Kyle Shanahan does. That's what Kevin O'Connell does. But imagine if one of them was just like, no, I'm not going to call plays. I'm just going to kind of be the CEO guy. That's like what Nick Sirianni does. That's why I always bash Nick Sirianni on this channel, is because he doesn't really fucking do anything. And that's kind of like what happened with Robert Saleh. He just didn't really do a whole lot for this team. And I don't think he was a great leader of men. He was not a great manager of the game. And it felt like Robert Saleh just never did himself any favors. I feel like Robert Saleh was a guy who was a little in over his head. I don't think he was ready to be a head coach. And I think the thing that really reflects that is his press conferences. He was constantly creating controversies for literally no reason. It's already a team with a lot of buzz. You're in New York. You have Aaron Rodgers. It's already a team that's already kind of just set up for controversy. But I feel like every time Robert Saleh went up to do a press conference, he would put his foot in his mouth and just say shit. They would just stir shit. It was just so unnecessary. Like, all the stuff with Aaron, blast him about his cadence. Even in the offseason, like saying, he could have just said, Aaron's doing his own thing, whatever. He didn't have to say a whole lot about it, but he goes like in depth. No, he's in Egypt. He was unexcused. Like, I just feel like he always made the situation worse for himself and the team, and I think that's really just showing that he wasn't ready to be a head coach. I don't know if he'll ever be a head coach again, but I think he'd be a sweet defensive coordinator. He can make a lot of money still in the NFL for a long time. I mean, he doesn't have to work another day in his life because the Jets have to pay him. I forget the amount, but he's going to be on the Jets books for at least the next 2 years for a lot of money to just sit on his couch. So he doesn't ever have to coach again if he doesn't want to, but if he does want to, I think he will. He could be a defensive coordinator for the next 20 years in the NFL because he proved that in San Francisco. If I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'd get on the phone immediately and call up Robert Saleh and say, hey, you want your old job back? And I think Saleh would accept that in a heartbeat because that's the job Saleh should have in the landscape of today's NFL. Maybe somewhere down the path, if he, grows more as just a leader of men, and if he does get an opportunity later down the road, I want to see him call defensive plays because that's what made him such a good coaching candidate. So overall, that's my thoughts on this situation. I just think it really highlights how dysfunctional the Jets are. I don't think it really solves any of their immediate problems. The big problem for this team is the offense, and firing Robert Saleh does absolutely nothing to address that, especially when you're elevating the defensive coordinator to the head coaching role. So for me, it just shows how mismanaged this team is. So let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. Do you think Robert Saleh should have been fired? And what do you think the Jets are going to look like going forward? I'll put a link in the description, my video where I listed my top 5 reasons why I didn't think the Jets will be a playoff team this year, because all of them look pretty legit right now. And I got a lot of shit for that video from Jets fans, and it looks like basically everything I said in that video was right. So if you made it this far, appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.